Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard the CRMA AGM Aircraft Carrier 2022. I am your cool, casual captain, Bobby Joe Campbell, who will moderate session 1. We have prepared the flight deck for this meeting. We are currently stationary in Caribbean waters at latitude 21 degrees 21 minutes 54 seconds north and longitude 157 degrees 57 minutes 0 seconds west. On behalf of our commanding officer, Dr. Shirley Curtis, our senior officers, Marcia Rollock, Dion Lewis, Franca Oliveri Andrews, Rhonda McLaurin Alfe, Latoya Pinnock Stevenson, Roslyn Ames Stewart, Marita Aris, and Deborah Lewis, it is our pleasure to serve you, and we hope that you will all enjoy the proceedings of the first day of 2 on board with HUT. Inside the ready room are some special officers from different units who will address the group. You will know who they are at the appropriate time. To officially start this session, I now invite Dr. Sonia Watson Miller to open with prayer.
Thank you very much. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. We thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to see another AGM of the Caribbean Regional Midwives Association. We help us, Lord, to remember that it is you that is in control, and help us, Lord, not to give up. Even preparing for this meeting, we might feel a bit, those that have prepared might feel a bit exhausted, but we have finally come to this moment. I pray, Lord, that you will help those individuals that are in this meeting to remember to mute their mics and to remember to have an open mind, that you will help them to hear what they need to hear and help them to see what they need to see that can better progress midwifery in the region, that we will use evidence-based practice. Help us, Lord, to guide this association, and I pray that you will guide this AGM, especially today. Be with the speakers, be with the moderators, be with those that are doing the question and answer and the thanks. Lord, this is my prayer. Take full control, and I thank you for answering our prayer in the name of Christ Jesus. Amen.
Thank you so much, Dr.
We have a couple different ways of doing it.
To recognize the member associations of CRMA, we will now enjoy the flag ceremony to the beat and words of the CARICOM anthem by Michelle Anderson.
From many distant lands, our forefathers came, some seeking adventure, some bound in chains. Through battles waged and fought, through victory and pain, by test of their courage, our freedom was gained. In homage to those gone before us, the heroes of lands in the sun, we vow to join hands and to focus on building one Caribbean. Raise your voices high, sing of your Caribbean pride. adversities. The bonds that unite us are stronger than these. We fight, pray, we love, dance and we play. We relate to each other, rest in your way. Today, as a people unite, determined and steadfast we stand. We look to a brand new horizon, the future now firmly in our hands. Raise your voices high, sing of your courage, your pride. Sing it loud and strong, till our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound of victory drums for Crma. Hele, hele, bravo. Hope you sing Calico. Leve, leve, bravo. Naki, you drum Calico. Sabu, yes, sabu, bravo. Hope you sing Calico. Leve, leve, bravo. Raise your voices high and sing of your courage, your pride. Sing it loud and strong, till our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound of victory drum. Oh, Caracon, hele, hele, bravo. Oh, when you sing Caracon, leve, leve, bravo. Hele, hele, bravo, yes, bravo, bravo. Knock your drum, Caracon, leve, leve, bravo.
I hope you enjoyed seeing your flag as the song played. To recognize the member as sorry. During the period of August 2021 to July 2022, we have lost some of our foot soldiers who goes by the professional title of midwives. To recognize their life, we now move into a moment of silence.
Our forefathers came, some seeking adventure, some bound in chains.
These are our members that died during the course of the year. May their souls rest in peace as their memories live on with us. And from Jamaica, we had Sonia Ruiz, we had Lena Spence Solomon, we had Corinne Roach Merchant, Pearl Abraham. Sorry, some of these are Jamaica and some from Trinidad. We also had Maria Williams, Stephanie Franklin Charles, Maria Copeland, Jermaine Ahaz, and let me see if I, okay, here we go. From St. Kitts and Nevis, Eulalie Brown. From Barbados, Patrice Whitcomb, Lady Grace Jordan, Bernice Griffith, Teresia McQuilkin. From St. Lucia, Marcella Niles and Maria John. From the Bahamas, so Sandra Colby, Kathy Seeley from Barbados, Kunte Bacchus from Guyana, along with Muriel Murray. And also from Barbados, Yvonne Osman, and from Trinidad. And the reason I'm going is because these things are all across my screen. And Jennifer Rahman from Trinidad. So can we have a moment of silence? And if you know of somebody whose name, can you mute your mics, please? If you know of somebody whose name you did not see, you can type their names in the chat. So we'll have a moment of silence.
Have not. I wasn't able to use for a few days. I don't know what my DDS.
Over to you, Bobby Joe.
Thank you, Dr. Curtis. At this time, I invite our commanding officer, Dr. Shirley Curtis, President of CRMA, to bring the welcome address.
So choose one and notice it.
Okay, good evening, everyone. As soon as I can get these mics muted, we
Dr. Curtis, please unmute.
gotcha. Okay, good evening, everyone. To our moderator, Captain Bobby Joe Campbell, and she really is a captain, okay? And she is running this ship very well tonight. Um, to our UNFPA regional consultant, Deborah Lewis, to Dr. Pandora Hartman, ICM regional representative for the Americas, our special guest, Ms. Carolyn Curtis, chief nursing officers of the Caribbean that might be on the chat, to our association president, Alia Gregory from Antigua Midwives Group, Ms. Andrea Nottage, president of the Midwives Association of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Mrs. Valeria Francis, president of the Barbados Midwives Group, Etheldra James, president of the Dominican Midwives Association, Maria Francois, president of the Guyana Midwives Association, Captain Bobby Joe Campbell, president of the Jamaican Midwives Association, Judith John, president of St. Lucia's Midwives Group, Mrs. Marcia Rullock, president of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Midwives, delegates and members from other member countries, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Suriname. It is a pleasure to welcome you to the 11th Annual General Meeting of the Caribbean Regional Midwives Association. CRMA, for those who do not know, was established in 2012 in Trinidad and Tobago following a Helping Babies Breathe Trainer of Trainers workshop. Our vision is to be the premier support mechanism for midwifery associations in the Caribbean. Our mission is to promote high standards of midwifery care through capacity strengthening, advocacy, education, and training, leadership, mentorship, and research to meet the needs of the childbearing families in the Caribbean. Now, you might notice that the vision and the mission sounds a little strange. That is because our capacity strengthening activities this year, we tweaked our mission and vision statements, and you will hear more about that as we roll out our 5-year strategic plans tomorrow. We hope that all of our member countries will join us tomorrow as we unveil the work that we have been doing for the last year and map the way forward. In fulfillment of our mission to promote high standards of midwifery care, each AGM has had an educational component. I would like to use, I would like you to use your thumbs up reaction button to indicate if you attended any of these sessions. So in 2012, we were
Yes,
in
sir.
Trinidad and we did Helping Babies Breathe. If you were there, put some thumbs up. In 2013, we were in Ecuador at the ICM Regional Conference. In 2014, we were in Antigua. We were introduced to ICM's curriculum mapping tool. In 2015 in Suriname, we again were at the ICM Regional Conference. In 2016, in Jamaica, we were introduced to the continuous professional development concept. In 2017, in Canada, was the Triennial Congress of the ICM. In 2018, in St. Lucia, we had presentations on mentorship, and we were introduced to the concept of respectful maternity care. At that session, we also graduated 4 young midwifery leaders from St. Lucia, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago. In 2019, in Barbados, our last face-to-face session to date, we launched the UNFPA Global Midwifery Strategy. In 2020, 2020, the year of the nurse and the midwife and the COVID-19 pandemic, that was our first virtual AGM via Zoom. We had a panel on leadership as well as presentations on water birth and intimate partner violence. 2021, just last year, we were still in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and we met via Zoom again, and the educational sessions were discussions on the State of the World Midwifery Report, which had just been released, and family planning with parenting. Now, if you were not able to raise your thumb for any of those sessions, we'd say, where were you? But welcome anyhow. Here we are in 2022, still on virtual platform, hopefully for the last time. Undoubtedly, we will have to embrace this technology for future AGMs, possibly offering a hybrid model to allow for a wider reach and increase attendance. We are social beings and we miss the socialization, the interaction, and the networking. Face-to-face also allows for more skill building and practical sessions. So we are going to look forward to that in the future. Hopefully, our next stop should be Guyana for our face-to-face session. This year at our AGM, we will be having an exciting educational itinerary. We are culminating our leadership workshop with a presentation from on emotional intelligence, and our skills topic is shoulder dystocia. Every midwife wants to know about shoulder dystocia. Tomorrow, we will be having the business session of the association where we will have reports from the president, the treasurer, and committee chairs. If you are a midwife from and are members of any of our member countries, you are invited to attend tomorrow's session. On behalf of this hard-working executive team of CRMA, and they can put on their cameras if they're decent. We have Vice President Bobby Joe Campbell from Jamaica. We have Secretary Dion Lewis from Trinidad and Tobago. We have Treasurer Franca Olivier Andrews from Trinidad and Tobago. We have Assistant Secretary Treasurer Rhonda Alfrey from St. Lucia and PRO Latoya Pinnock Stevenson from Jamaica. Our trustees are Rosalind Stewart from Trinidad, Marita Harris from Barbados. Our immediate past president, Marcia Rolla, and our UNFPA representative, Mrs. Deborah Lewis, also make up a part of our executive team. We welcome you and thank you for taking the time to sign on. We hope that you have a time of rejuvenation, enrichment, and recommitment over the next 2 evenings, and that your objectives will be satisfied. So we say thank you for coming and welcome. Back over to you, Captain Bobby Joe.
Thank you so much, Dr. Curtis. Earlier on, I made mention of some special officers in the ready room. Now it is time to hear from them. The pleasure is mine to invite Operations Officer Dr. Pandora Hartman, ICM Regional Representative for the Americas, to bring opening remarks. Dr. Pandora Hartman.
Distinguished Caribbean Midwives Executive Committee, special guest, honored Midwifery Association Executive Committees, and midwives all over our beloved region. I bring you greetings on behalf of the International Confederation of Midwives. It is indeed a pleasure to be here with you at this year's annual general meeting. I look forward to the conversations over the coming days as we dive deeply into the clinical and the strategic issues that are relevant for us as midwives today. The topics that you have chosen over these next days are salient to all of us as we continue to delve deeply into the state of the world's midwifery and the global strategic directions for nursing and midwifery 21 to 25 to advance the global mandates in our country to advance quality midwifery care. The 4 priority areas, education, jobs, leadership, service delivery, are all concerning to us. With your help, we look forward to the day when we have enough educated, competent midwives who are recruited and retained within the health workforce, with each one of us feeling respected, supported, and protected to meet the needs. As we fly into this AGM today, I want to remind you how you and the Caribbean diaspora are making a difference. It's interesting that you chose what I think of as an auspicious day to convene this meeting, July 21st. On this day, did you know that Prince George Alexander Louis of Cambridge, the first child of Prince William, Duke of Cambridge, and Duchess Catherine, was born today in London, 2013? Why do we care? Well, we care because one of the ladies who handled the Duchess's delivery was a professor and educator of midwifery, Jackie Dunkley Bent, a Jamaican midwife of Windrush parents. The Duchess bonded with so much during her first delivery that she went on to request these midwives again and again. So fast forward to spring 2019, when this same midwife was named the first chief midwifery officer of the UK, a role that she never dreamed of 6 years earlier, when on this day, July 21st, all she wanted to do was provide good care. Just think of the midwifery now integrally bound every time we commemorate the diaspora and the royal birthdays. Intent to impact. In the words of Jackie herself, the whole of us is greater than the sum of our parts. But remember, you have to take care of each of those parts. As we lift off this evening to higher heights, take care of your parts, the clinical, education, and social that will allow you to continue upon this midwifery path. We are here united in purpose, a vision where every childbearing woman has access to a midwife's care for herself and her newborn. We know that we can fly high and deliver the safe quality care that is every woman's right. We know that we must advance to leadership to continue to influence decision-making at all levels, from health facilities to the hallowed halls of government. Continue, raise your voices high, sing of our Caribbean pride. I wish you fruitful deliberations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hartman. And you see, when persons are in the ready room on an aircraft carrier, this is where history takes place and presentations and strategic plan is put into operations. And now our operations officer just delivered, and I'm sure we have learned something new as it relates to the history where our midwives are concerned through Professor Jacqueline Dunkley Bent. The final opening remark will be done by Senior Chief Officer, Mrs. Deborah Lewis, UNFPA representative.
Thank you, Captain, for the introduction and the invitation to come on board. Good evening, colleagues all. On behalf of Dr. Vicky Camacho, who is the Regional Technical Advisor in Sexual and Reproductive Health in the Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, who unfortunately is not able to be with us tonight, I want to firstly congratulate CRME. Since 2011, the UNFPA LACRO office, in partnership with other agencies, have been implementing a program of work to strengthen professional midwifery in Latin America and the Caribbean. The program of activities is based on the shared vision that competent midwives are key to the delivery of comprehensive, respectful, and evidence-based care to women, newborns, families, and in fact, communities. Our continuing collaboration with the International Confederation of Midwives, regional
Like
and
me on my laptop, I was having issues still.
Regional and national midwifery associations enables and empowers midwives to help bridge the gaps. In Latin America and the Caribbean, however, investments in quality midwifery have been inadequate, in large part because of the lack of awareness of the potential role that midwives can play in promoting maternal and newborn health. From the beginning, UNFPA has worked with stakeholders to emphasize and sensitize them to the vital role of a midwife. A major implementing strategy has also been to build capacity in the region, to provide needed technical support, initially through the use of globally recognized consultants and subsequently through the preparation and mentoring of midwifery leaders as consultants in the region, which is how I became a consultant for our region. Dr. Camacho will be retiring this year, but to ensure continuity in the region, we're preparing a report. This regional report will present an overview of the major activities to strengthen midwifery supported by UNFPA LACRO since 2011. The objective is to highlight the work undertaken so that decision makers, program managers, and midwives themselves can continue the work, scaling up successful approaches and accelerating progress. It will also, on the basis of an environmental scan, make recommendations for future priorities to be supported, as well as key approaches and strategies to be used. So again, I really want to take the opportunity to thank CRMA for stepping up and getting the work done, and to wholeheartedly thank Dr. Camacho, not only for her vision, but for the support over the years, and even more so for ensuring through that regional report with the recommendations, etc., that the work will continue even after her retirement. Thank you, and I am fully on board, Captain.
Thank you, Senior Chief Officer. We have now come to the end of session 1. Our seas remain calm and skies clear. You are free to take a 2-minute stretch break. Enjoy walking around the flight deck and be prepared for session 2 in 2 minutes from now. Thank you so much for your participation and your cooperation.
So now we can take a water break. We can take a bathroom break because then we're going to be moving into session 2 with our first speaker. 2 minutes. Etheldra?
Aye.
Our moderator for this session is Etheldra James from Dominica. Over to you,
Am
Etheldra.
I there?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So let me get out of this. All right. So good evening, everyone. Once again, welcome to session 2 of our first day. I'm not sure I'm going to be flying or a good ship like our previous captain, but I'm going to try. For the second part of our program tonight, we're going to look at leadership with emotional intelligence. However, before we get into this aspect, I'm just going to give you a brief review of what has taken place over the past 3 weeks in relation to the leadership workshop. The leadership workshop began on July 1st after a brief opening ceremony, and there are 25 participants represented by Antigua, Bahamas, Barbados, Dominica, St. Lucia, Guyana, St. Kitts and Nevis, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago. From the opening and subsequently every Friday night, participants were thrilled with 2 exciting presentations from experienced personnel. Our first topic was qualities of a leader, and that was presented by Ms. Obinette Rowe. There we learned a leader is a visionary who influences others to reflect, learn, and unlearn. We learned that the leader must be transparent, especially when there are opposing opinions and the stakes are high. He or she must know the self. They must know when to retreat. This is the first step in regaining one's footing. And the best and most effective decisions are made when this happens. It also helps to realign with the organization's principles and morals. Then a comprehensive decision can be made. You don't share everything. There is a right time and place. The leader must be adaptable. There must be a willingness to manage a change and new ideas, as well as being able to manage unexpected demands. In so doing, there's a need to strategize, knowing what are the steps, the tools, and personnel needed, as well as the expected time frame. All the while communicating with the staff of the vision, the reason for so doing, in order to get all on board. In relation to personnel, a leader guides the staff into making good choices as to their destiny. The leader assists in identifying the steps needed to enable the individual to move from one point to another. He or she promotes teamwork, knowing that as the challenges escalate, so does the need for teamwork. Therefore, that leader provides hope. This hope is the foundation of change and the will to succeed. Finally, a leader is a good listener. He listens to others as one can't learn from their own speaking. The ear of the leader must ring with the voices of the people. This section was followed by Dr. Wendy Seeley on the topic of communications of a leader. We began by differentiating between management and leadership. Management consists of controlling a group or set of entities to accomplish a goal, whereas leadership is an individual's ability to influence, motivate, and enable others to contribute towards that goal. Communication is needed at all levels in order to achieve results. Effective communication and the critical role that it plays in core functionality was emphasized. There must be clarity in expressing ideas and information with multitude of audiences. Leaders must learn to handle the rapid flow of information at various audiences, example, customers, the partners, and the staff. It must be purposeful and intentional about effective communication. So we learned the use of SPRR, that is stop, pause, reflect, review, and respond. You know how and when to respond. Select the appropriate time, which reinforces the retreat, realign, and respond method reviewed under leadership. The 4 types of leadership were looked at: writing, conversing, presenting, and facilitating. And for any of these to be effective, the leader must be relentless, simple and direct, listen and encourage input, illustrate through shares, and affirm with action. It is important to know that for difficult conversation, example, a negative experience or an uncomfortable topic, the leader must plan ahead. The aim of the communication is not to persuade or coerce. Say what needs to be said using the freedom principles. This time it's fairness, respect, equality, dignity, autonomy, and leave it there. By week 2, we were addressed on mentorship by Mrs. Prescula-Roll. Mentorship is a fundamental form of human development where one person invests time, energy, and the personal skills in assisting the growth and ability of another person. It may be formal or informal and can occur outside of one's workplace. This should be for employees who show promise and need help to become a top performer. 2 examples of how mentoring can help an organization. It bridges generation divide as mentor and mentee help each other grasp a better understanding of any new workable communication and processing. And 2, it is critical to success as it increases employee engagement and retention. The 4th topic at night 2 was performance evaluation by Miss Movetwet Wyatt. Performance evaluation is a process where the manager examines and evaluates an employee's work behavior by comparing it with standards. The results are used to provide feedback to show where improvements are needed. Therefore, it must be accurate and should be done by one who has observed the employee's work for the said period. Some reasons for appraisal: it affects pay, retention, and development of the employee. Leaders and employees develop a plan of correction for deficiencies, as well as reinforces good practices, and it facilitates career planning. Some factors influencing effective appraisal: the appraiser should be aware of his or her bias and must keep accurate anecdotes. Guard against the halo, Horn, and Matthew effect, as well as central tendencies. For those who are in there, the halo effect is the use of 1 or 2 positive aspects to unduly influence all other aspects. So the employee gets a glowing report. The Horn effect is the opposite of the halo, where 1 or 2 negatives influences are used and the employee receives a very poor report. The Matthew effect is receiving the same appraisal every year with little to no change. And central tendency is the hesitancy to risk true assessment. Therefore, the assessor grades all employees as average. Overcoming difficulties in appraising personnel: 1, never state a weakness without a solution. Make sure to plan the appointment, give 2 to 3 days of advance notice. Focus on the employee's performance and avoid vague generalization. Never threaten, intimidate, or use status in any manner, and we end the meeting on a pleasant note. By week 3, we got around to project planning and budgeting by Ms. Ketura Belgrove. And in order to have a better understanding of the presentation, some terms were defined. Project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique service or result. Yes. Project management, application of knowledge, tools, skills, and techniques to conduct activities to meet the project requirement. A proposal, a straightforward, logically organized, clear documentation, which includes essential details that will guide a project. Design, a broad concept, which is often considered as a tool for making things better. Plan, a special project management document, which enables the project to focus on one optimum arrangement. It outlines the scope, time, and costs. Budgeting is an estimate of income and expenditure for a said period of time. There were 3 methods of budgeting: the incremental, the activity-based, and the zero-based. The overall purpose for project planning and budgeting is to provide quality care Therefore, the individual must have an intimate knowledge of the project, solid work ethics, and the ability to complete tasks at high standard. Two advantages of planning and budgeting are for better control of financial, physical, and human resources, and it improves customer relation. Some of the skills needed to succeed are leadership, listening, ability to trust, verbal communication, conflict resolution, and management. Self-motivation and computer literacy is an added advantage. And this brought us right into the next topic of technology literacy by Mr. Mark Wilder. Technology is the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes, especially in an industry and now our lives. Thus, this session was an overall guide and introduction into the electronic world, which began with knowing the workable programs on the phone and the computer. Example, when buying a device, what is the basic numbers in random access memory needed for the operation, such as the phone would need at least 4 kilobytes with 32 gigabytes of storage, while a computer you would need 6 kilobytes and 128 gigabytes of random access memory. All of them should contain quad core processors. The manner in which artificial intelligence can enhance our homes, daily lives, and clinical learning practice was explored via video clippings. Finally, we were reminded of the best practices in technology. We should have regular backups, keep devices up to date, have multiple copies of sensitive data, and we will want to be careful of flash drives. It is better to save in the cloud. And so here we continue along the same trend with tonight's topic on emotional intelligence in leadership. As I introduce to you our first presenter, Dr. Caroline Curtis. After completing her nursing and midwifery degrees, Ms. Curtis worked domestically, providing clinical services in both private and public settings, mainly in the Washington, D.C. area. She balanced clinical practice and administration, serving as the administrator for a teen pregnancy program in Washington, D.C., and later as the director for the Division of Nurse Midwifery at the Washington, D.C.'s only public health hospital, overseeing midwifery services in both the hospital and 8 community health centers. Caroline also served as faculty at numerous schools of nursing, including Howard University, Charles Drew University, the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and Case Western Reserve University, providing both classroom and clinical teaching to nursing, midwifery, and medical students. In 2002, she began her international health career with USAID, working as a project manager and technical advisor in the areas of family planning, reproductive health, and maternal child health. She has overseen activities in over 20 countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Caroline's achievements were recognized by the American College of Nurse Midwives, with her receiving their highest award, the Lifetime Visionary Achievements Award, in May 2022. Ms. Curtis has recently reinvigorated her company, the CARAB Company, PLLC, and perhaps soon her desire to sing at an exclusive restaurant will come true. I present to you Dr. Curtis Caroline. Is she there?
Hi, Carolyn. She is there. She's unmuted, but I'm not hearing her.
Okay.
Hi, Carolyn, are you there?
Let's see.
Up. We're not hearing you. You're unmuted, but we are not getting any sound. Do you have a do you have a earpiece? Are you using a earpiece? Do you have a headphone? Try that. Okay. We seem to be having a little technical difficulty. Just hold on
Do
for us,
we
please.
want to go to the second person? Okay, you want to hold on. Okay,
No, just give her a minute.
okay.
Unmute your unmute your microphone, Carolyn. You're muted right now. Let's see if I could. Okay.
Shirley, are you still seeing her?
She's rejoining right now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great, okay. Just to say thank you to everyone for having me speak tonight. I'm really happy for this opportunity. And I actually learned quite a lot as I prepared for this presentation. So let me start my screen and we'll talk about this. So what I would like to do tonight is to just talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. And the outline for the presentation is to just stop for a minute to look at the anatomy of the brain and the function of the different parts of the brain, to also talk about what is emotional intelligence. Actually, it's the building of character. Look at emotional intelligence within the workplace and also within medical care. And as we talk about emotional intelligence, it has application not only for leadership, but for our daily lives with family as well as within the workplace. So let's just take a quick look. What I'd like to first do is to take a quick look at the brain and the different parts of the brain.
We're not seeing your screen.
You're not seeing the screen, okay?
No.
Let me double check on that. Sorry for all of these little technical difficulties. Are you able to see it now?
No. Do you want me to share it?
Yes, do you mind?
Sure, I'll do it.
Thank you. Usually I have no issues. I don't know why all the issues today.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, great. And if you could put it onto slideshow.
Slideshow, yes.
Yes, okay.
Mhm.
So we're now on slide number 3. Okay. If we could just take a quick look at the different parts of the brain to understand what are the functions and roles for each of these, and it will help us to understand emotional intelligence a little bit better. It's really the brain and its function that will really help us with understanding reactions and emotions and feelings. So if we look at the brainstem, this is basically where all of the basic life functions, such as breathing, the body's metabolism, the organs, and the control of our usual reactions and movements, that happens from the brain stem. The neocortex, which would be the prefrontal cortex, and that's where the thinking part of the brain comes in. This is where when we think about how we're going to react to something, we want to plan, comprehend, coordinate things. It's the intelligence, it's the seat of thought in the brain. The limbic system are layers of the emotional brain that add some proper emotion to the brain's repertoire. It's responsible for learning and also for memory. But the little part, which is the amygdala, that is the real powerhouse when it comes to emotions and also to emotional memory. And when my reading that I did, when any time that any kind of surgery is done that may affect the amygdala, it really strips the person of personal meaning in their lives. So the amygdala is this really, really critical part of the brain that really shows emotion quickly. Next slide, please. What's important to understand is that when we look at each other, when we look at situations that happen, when we have tense situations that can occur, there is an actual physiological occurrence that goes on. Normally, when we see things, when we get information about what is happening in front of us, it's normally handled initially by the prefrontal cortex or the neocortex of the brain. However, there are times when the amygdala hijacks all of this. And instead of it going through a thought process as to how are we going to process and manage and react to a situation, the amygdala takes over. And this happens generally when we have physiological stresses occurring. The other is when there have been memories of previous events that have happened. The amygdala will quickly snap into place before we've had opportunity to think about the situation and to even consider how are we going to react and respond. Would you go to the next slide, please? Generally, one of these emotions that I will talk about, and is something that we will often see within workplaces or in our society, is when there is a perceived threat to our physical or emotional well-being, where we're concerned about what is our self-esteem, what is our reputation going to be like. I was listening to some of the topics that were covered before and talking about evaluations within the workplace and how difficult it can be to give criticism or evaluations to someone. They may feel that their reputation or their self-esteem may be attacked, particularly if they're not performing well. And so this can bring up anger within that person. Anger also happens when there's a threat to our resources, such as finances, possessions, or people that we care about. When there is a level of uncertainty where we're fearful or where we're concerned about rejection or shame, can also trigger emotions regarding this. And then internal sources, such as recalling a trauma or something that happened in the past. And this is a thing that's also retained in the amygdala. And so this is something that can cause reactions where, think about when you have thought, I am losing it, in terms of your reaction to something that may have happened, say with a coworker or also within a family member. There are times when we feel like I am losing it. You know, your emotions take over your thought process. This is one of those things that happens with the amygdala. And I'm using anger as one of the emotions that one will experience when this amygdala happens. Can you go to the next slide, please? I'm giving two examples. Unfortunately, the pictures are overtaken. And when we hear about kind of news events that happen, the two examples that I'm giving is one where there was a shooting at a FedEx warehouse, which is a mail delivery warehouse in one of the states here in the United States. This happened in 2002, and it was done by a 19-year-old employee who had not worked at that facility for 2 years. And so this is an example of where his finances were likely threatened and reached to the point of where his anger took over. And he essentially killed 5 people during this particular event. Another event that's happened in Trinidad and Tobago, where there was a high rate of street gang violence. And this could be an example of when one may feel their reputation or their self-esteem when we think about young men who may be involved with street violence. These may be the things that trigger the anger that instead of it being thought through in both of these situations, these are great examples of the amygdala, this amygdala hijack that occurs, where instead of there being a thought process where all of these events go through the neocortex or the precortex of the brain, it goes straight to the amygdala. And then you have this very stark reaction that occurs. The next slide, please. What can we do to stop this hijack? And this is only one particular emotion, is to be aware of circumstances that may cause a reaction that we may have or reaction within staff members. Being able to stop, to calm down, take control. I heard some of this language in some of the previous leadership topics that have been discussed so far. Engage your reasoning. Now this is to move this out of the amygdala back to the prefrontal cortex or the neocortex of the brain so that our thought process can take over. Also being mindful of the bias that we may have in the certain situation, whether it's bias towards the circumstance itself, bias towards the persons involved in the situation, and then consciously, deliberately focus your attention on the particular situation at hand. These would be the things that one would do. Could you go to the next slide, please? So what is this emotional intelligence? What is this all about? And we hear this term, and this term has been around for much longer than we may think. The classic book on emotional intelligence was written approximately 20 years ago, initially being published in actually more than 20 years, 1988. So let's go to the next slide to talk a little bit more about what is actually emotional intelligence. Next slide, please. There are 5 domains of emotional intelligence. And further in the slide deck, we'll be able to get more definition to this. But it's to know one's emotions, to be self-aware of your own emotions. To manage emotions, your own emotions. What you know is then to be able to manage the emotions in the situations that are presented. This is where we need to think about, this is the use again of the prefrontal cortex, where we think about the circumstances. Also being able to motivate oneself, to be able to function within a circumstance that may be difficult or to move beyond that particular situation. Recognizing emotions that others may have. It's not only the emotions that we may be experiencing, but also recognizing what others may be experiencing that we're working with, whether that is physicians, whether that is your other nursing or midwifery leaders, or even your clientele that you're working with. And then knowing how to handle the relationships. These are the 5 areas of emotional intelligence. Next slide, please. I have a handout that I sent to Dr. Curtis, but to understand that emotions fall into a family of emotions. And then that family of emotions includes anger was 1, sadness, fear, enjoyment, love, surprise, disgust, and shame. And this is just a broad, when we say a family, then there's much more nuances into each of these areas of emotions. And those nuances, as they ripple out, will define the mood that a person may find themselves in, the temperament that they find themselves in. And if we take this to the extreme fringes, then we have disorders of emotions, such as depression, clinical depression, bipolar disorder. These are the disorders of emotions that can occur. Next slide, please. The handout talks about the family of emotions and gets more into each of these kind of moods or temperaments or nuances that are within each of these families. There's also interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligence. Next slide, please. The interpersonal is our ability to understand other people. This is when we look at our colleagues, when we look at our clients, when we look at our family members. What is it that motivates them? How can we work cooperatively with them? The core of interpersonal intelligence is the ability and capacity to be able to discern and to respond appropriately to the moods, the temperaments, the motivations that are brought about by others. For intrapersonal intelligence, that's to turn in and look at our own selves. That's the ability to be able to form an accurate model of ourself and to be able to have that, to be able to really look at that and to be able to have that model help us to operate effectively in our lives, which means getting to know ourselves. It's the core part of this is our own self-knowledge, to be able to access our own feelings and to be able to discriminate about the feelings that we have and to draw upon them to be able to help us determine and guide our behavior. Is, I know myself, when I have a situation, there are times that I'm like, I don't know what is going on inside of me. I need to stop. I need to sometimes sit and write and try to really revisit the circumstance and write out what I feel that I'm feeling to be able to come up with the emotion that I think that I'm having. How can we learn emotional intelligence? This link that I have here actually has a small exercise. It's about 15 questions that you can answer, and it will give you your score of your emotional intelligence. And under each of the areas, it will tell you those areas you need to work on or help to illuminate your own areas for emotional intelligence. Next slide, please. So one thing to understand as well is that this is also working with how our brain matures and develops, is that emotional intelligence is about our brains and how we are processing, how we are dealing with things, information that we see, that we hear, we take in with our senses. It's important to know that every region of the brain is going to develop at different rates, and emotional intelligence is not something that we learn as an adult. It's really what we need to be learning as children. And what we see in terms of the outrage or the outcome or the inability to manage one's emotions is because this didn't really happen during childhood. We think of this really, as was noted, is that it's really the development of character within a child. And so puberty is one of the most sweeping periods of pruning throughout the whole development. The sensory areas mature during childhood. The limbic system matures by puberty. The frontal lobes, which is the seat of thought and emotional self-control, understanding, that it continues to develop into late adolescence up until the ages of 16 to 18 years of age. But we really need to be working with children as young as ages 2 to 7, that this is where there's a lot of growth in the brain in terms of neurons, in terms of the synapses occurring within the brain. And this is where we need to really be exposing children to emotional intelligence, teaching them how to be kind, teaching them empathy for others, teaching them how to work together, to play together. This needs to happen early, not later in life, because if this hasn't been laid down early, then we see what we see. It's also possible to learn emotional intelligence. As children, we want to help them to be able to label their emotions. And I will say, even for myself, growing up as a child, you kind of did what your parents told you to do. There was not the opportunity for you to say, well, I feel this way or I feel that. Didn't matter. You're going to be obedient to your family, your parents. But it's also helping me to, even at this point in my life, sometimes as I mentioned before, I need to stop. I need to do some self-awareness to understand what am I feeling at this time and how do I react. And this is a thing that takes practice, that the more that we can practice being able to identify our emotions, to be able to understand the circumstances that may have created those emotions that are in the past, again, sitting in that amygdala in our brains will help us to know how to react and to respond when we are faced with a similar situation currently or in the future. The other thing that was mentioning is being able to help children tell a story about what made them feel that way. And I think for our own, what makes us feel how we feel when we are in certain circumstances with coworkers, in circumstances with supervision, and teamwork, all of those things. Next slide, please. We heard a little bit about this before, earlier on, in terms of the first, what is emotional intelligence? We talked about motivating ourselves to persist. When we're feeling frustrated, we need to be able to still persist during that frustration, but to be able to control impulses and delay gratification, regulate our moods, and help distress from overtaking our ability to be able to think through a situation. And also to be able to empathize and to have hope. Next slide. So actions that we can take to be able to obtain emotional awareness. And that's the first big thing in terms of emotional intelligence, is to stop and take time to really look at our own selves. That is going to be your own self-awareness, knowing your own story, how it affects you. There are many times that we have work situations that we're, I've had a work situation where my patience was done. You're just like, I'm finished. And it's really trying to understand what is causing you to say, I'm finished with this situation. Is it because of it's a repeated sort of thing where your anger grows from one exposure to the next exposure to the next exposure, where you feel that you have no more patience for the person or the situation at hand. So this is a list of the different sorts of things. I'm not going to read through each one of them. I think everyone has access to the presentation. But then again, ability to self-manage, to learn skills, whether these are relaxation skills when you find yourself being very stressed, or find yourself in situations that you know are going to increase your anxiety, increase your anger, particular emotions. Also doing any kind of healing work that we need to do for our own selves. Awareness, social awareness, understanding nonverbal signals. And there, we'll see in another slide where it has been proven that no matter what, there are kind of universal signals for different types of emotions that are being experienced. Understand basic human emotional needs. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then relationship management. I heard this earlier in the conversation around providing input, supervision, how to manage that, not giving all information at one time, so being able to time when you're providing particular information to an employee. The other is learning conflict resolution skills. And then the developing the skills of support and affirmation of others. This is just kind of a repeat of what you've heard in previous sessions around this. Next slide, please. So these are the universal expressions of emotions. There's been a lot of research, and they've had over 75 studies have done that say, no matter what, these are the kinds of expressions that are universal for the different types of emotions that are elicited in a spontaneous way. And so it's, as we talk about emotional intelligence, being able to look at how people are responding or reacting. And this is, again, an illustration of what people express when there's joy, when there's sadness, when there's anger, fear, disgust, surprise. There was even studies done in a society that had had no outside exposure, had never seen cameras, and they gave these same sorts of facial expressions. And so for us to be able to understand these facial expressions and what they're saying, sometimes these expressions are made before words are even spoken. And if you're able to recognize these kinds of emotions, it will be helping you with your emotional intelligence as well. The next slide, please. We talked about the different types of areas of emotional intelligence, and these next slides just kind of go through some actions for us to do to be able to own emotional intelligence. I don't want to read for every phrase that's on the slides, but to just give you these slides to give you some information about what you can do to increase your own emotional intelligence. Managing emotions, and this was looking at also with children as well as with adults. These were things that came out of studies looking at both. You can go to the next slide. That's emotional self-awareness. There's a slide for each, how to manage our emotions. When we're able to do that, we are better able to express anger appropriately. In the schools, they found that when they worked with children around emotional intelligence, that there was fewer suspensions, expulsions, less aggressive or self-destructive behavior, better at handling stress, and that will be for all of us. Next slide. If we're looking at emotions in others, being able to, and this kind of will come into empathy, being able to understand another person's perspective. I think about what has happened with COVID and the effect that it has had on people in regard to deaths in their families. This is for staff. Over needing to work more than normal. I'm just trying to think of things in the medical system. These are things that when we look at what others may be feeling or their other perspective is trying to kind of walk in their shoes or put ourselves into their shoes. This will help us to be able to understand better, to have better empathy and sensitivity to what others might be feeling, which will enable us to hear them better, to listen to them better. So we can go to the next slide as well. Handling relationships. I am not a confrontational type person. I can tell you that. I try to not have confrontation, but there are times when it's necessary and that it's also positive. If we're able to understand why do I not want to handle confrontation, that's something I need to look at. But once we're able to look at that and understand why, better at solving problems, it allows us to be more assertive and be more skilled. It's something to practice. These are some ways to be able to handle relationships. Next slide, please. So when we are able to really increase our intrapersonal and interpersonal emotional intelligence, it has kind of cross-sectional effects. With our emotions, that is for both interpersonal, but also it increases our social awareness for interpersonal. With behaviors, if we're understanding our own behaviors, it allows us to manage ourselves better. And then that will also spill over into having better management of relationships. If we're looking at our own work performance, how do we work our own self-performance? That will also help us. Also, we can look at from an interpersonal standpoint, how are other people performing as well? Next slide. So some things in the workplace, we can go to the next slide. This is a little bit of a repeat of what I have been saying, that again, with personal competence and then also with social competence. Again, the interpersonal and for individuals and the intrapersonal. One thing is looking at and recognizing how does our behavior impact others in terms of our own self-awareness. Pay attention to how others influence our emotional state. So as much as we want to look at how do others impact us, how do we impact others? For a social awareness, when you're in a room or when you're in a team meeting or when you're working with others, what is the mood within the room? Our social awareness will help us to pick up that mood in the room better so that we can kind of manage the situation. Care what others are going through. We've talked about that just a little bit before. With self-management, all of these things will help us to clearly express our ideas and information in a more clear fashion. Again, empathy for managing the interactions effectively, handling conflict effectively with relationship management, and sensitivity to manage interactions. So it's a little bit of a repeat of what was said before. This, I think, has been discussed in your previous workshops that you've had, in terms of being able to give criticism and critique. And I've heard this before. What's destructive is when it feels like a personal attack, as opposed to a way to help this individual with their work, to give suggestions for improvement. This has already been said, so I'm not going to spend much time on this slide. Working with teams. Emotional intelligence with working with teams. From an individual level, again, working with our own emotions, regulating our own emotions. Then when we go to a group, how do we work with group emotions? I know many times you can walk into a room and depending on what's happening with one or two people, it can change the entire mood of the room. So we want to be aware of that and know how to work with that particular group. And then it will help us to be able to regulate, to help move the group to where we want them to go. And then when we go outside, particularly when we're working with other colleagues in other organizations or other units that we're working on in a hospital or in a practice, our ability to work with our own emotions and work with group emotions will also allow us to work with emotions for those that fall outside of the normal group that we work in. Next slide. Medical care. Actually, emotional intelligence has effect upon the care that we provide to clients. And when I think about leadership, I think not only leadership for leading staff members or other midwives or nurses that you're working with, but I also think about what is the leadership that we can make a difference for the healthcare system as well as patient care. Some things that have made a difference, that have changed medical care, is being able to offer full information. One thing that I saw in the letter of invitation was working with women across sexual and reproductive health. That when we work with clients, it's really important to be able to give them full information, particularly about their medical care, so that it can help reduce their anxiety. To help patients to be effective questioners, to encourage them to be able to ask questions. My experience working with women, particularly as we work with them doing prenatal care and wanting them to consider family planning, is as much as we want to think that women have the agency to ask all these questions, I don't think that they do. We are seen as healthcare providers as kind of, the expert, and patients are very leery about being able to ask their questions. They're afraid to bring those questions forth. How can we create the environment where they feel like it's safe for them to ask questions? Things such as asking, so what are your plans after this pregnancy? When do you want to be pregnant again? Open the door for many women to be able to discuss family planning, when I don't think if we did not ask those questions, they would have never brought the topic up. The other was, an example was when new family planning methods were being introduced. This was particularly when DEPO was really being introduced. I told our staff, we need to let the women know that when we start them on a family planning method, whether it's DEPO or another method, it's a start. If they don't like it, they need to feel free to tell us they don't like the method, so that we can help them move to a method or help manage the side effects that they might have from the method that they're using. The result, if you don't do that, is that patients will, if they miss taking a pill, will not tell you, and then because they're afraid to say something. And so that ends up then with an unintended pregnancy that they come back with. And you'll ask, so what happened? They say, well, I forgot to take my pill. And you're like, you could have called us and we could have worked with you and do that. Other things, this probably happens, is being able to allow family members to stay with clients during labor, during other procedures, to be able to help reduce the anxiety that's there. Relaxation techniques for clients to help them be able to relax, to be able to answer questions that they have about procedures that are coming up, so that they can have better recovery. The research shows that when you are doing, they were doing psychological support for groups, And when this was done, this decreased their recovery time compared to those who did not have this psychological support. Next slide, please. I think it's covered in there. Allowing patients to be able, I think, to express the feelings that they have, whether that is anger, anxiety, concern, all of these things can help to prevent disease. And I talked about the emotional support and also being able to help clients deal with depression in orthopedic care ended up with women, with patients leaving the hospital earlier, resulting in cost savings to the health system. Next slide. These are the resources that I have used with preparing this presentation. There are many more, but the classic is Coleman's Emotional Intelligence. That's where, that is the classic document. And then as you read all of the other resources, you will find that they kind of go back to the findings that were in the classic document of emotional intelligence. So thank you for the time. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you.
Good evening to all. Dr. Curtis Caroline, thank you so much for your timely presentation on emotional intelligence. And this presentation is extremely timely, and we recognize that we need to build our character through emotional intelligence. We need to get to know ourselves, self-awareness, and it is important for us also to convey or to bring forward this information during patient care as well. So thank you so much for taking time out and doing this presentation for us. Are there any questions that anyone would love to ask? Please put your questions in the chat, or you can open your mics and ask your questions. No questions? Okay, I have one question. How important it is for self-awareness for individuals in leadership and management positions? How important is it for an individual to be self-aware?
I would say it's very important. One example that was given when I was looking at an article regarding nursing leadership, one example talked about an interchange between a nurse and a physician. And the interchange ended up being where it was the nurse feeling that she needed to prove herself to this physician. And when she stopped and looked at this, it was because of things that had happened to her outside of the work situation, things that had occurred to her in her personal life, where because of her sense of, what shall I say, her not feeling good about her own self and her needing to prove herself, this carried over into this interface with this particular physician. And so it's important that as we look at self-awareness, we will have many kinds of, again, keep in mind that amygdala keeps these things in your head. It is a constant store of memories of things that occurred over in your childhood, as you grew up, many different circumstances. And when something comes up that is similar, that immediately comes up and can affect how you deal with and respond to the situation at hand. So it's very important to stop, The handout that I did send, I hope everyone has access to that, helps you to look and to name some of these emotions. And so as we think about a circumstance that may have made us upset or made us uncomfortable, is if we could maybe stop, take time, write out what was that situation. And then I'm not always good at naming an emotion for myself. I have to kind of look at this and say, okay, I was feeling like this. Having that list of emotions will help you to identify that. And then so that when this comes up again, you will now have your prefrontal, neocortex engaged so that you have thought through this and can anticipate that something similar may happen again. So the self-awareness is really, really important.
Okay, thank you. Also, for some of us grew up in a society whereby we were taught not to show emotions.
Exactly.
So how do you go beyond that, where now you're in a situation where, you grew up you were practically discouraged to, show your emotions. Then you're in a situation where you're asked to, be emotionally intelligent. How do you move forward with something like that?
So I think is now that we have some information, is to begin now, not wait until situation happens. But again, think of a situation that may have happened to you recently. It doesn't have to necessarily be the workplace. It can be a personal relationship. It can be within your family. It can be any of that. Write it out. Look at, how did I feel? And as you're correct, I didn't grow up with this luxury of saying, oh, well, I feel like this. It didn't matter. You were to be obedient to your parent. And so now this is the time to begin saying, okay, how did I feel in this circumstance? How did I feel in this situation? And try to name that emotion. I'll just repeat and say, I can't always name the emotion that I'm feeling. I just know that I'm upset and I can't quite put my finger on it. And until I stop, I do a lot of journaling when I'm in that situation. Then I'm like, okay, this is what went on. This is how I felt. And then I can then express that, which is mentioned again, once you're self-aware, you're able to communicate more clearly as to how you felt about a situation. Okay.
Okay. So I'm just going to read some of the comments in the chat.
I have a question.
Oh, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes. Listening to this topic of Dr. Curtis, what are your thoughts on the current trend of encouraging children to decide their sexuality?
Oh my God.
It's emotion, because they say, I feel like a female, but I'm born a male. I feel like a male, but I was born a female. How does the emotional intelligence, because I understand you're saying that we need to guide them through these emotions. So how do you address these?
So I think that's a very good question, and I'm going to be answering off the top of my head as I respond to you. But the thing of it, one thing that I did not talk about that is also in the book is diversity. Okay, when we talk about all the LGBTQ, that is addressed under diversity, along with many, many other things. I think it's going to be the very same thing. One thing that was mentioned in terms of the diversity, I wanted to put this slide in, but didn't have the time, was prejudices. That prejudices are things that are developed in childhood, and these are things that are taught, and it's harder sometimes to get rid of that. Because it's so ingrained. And I'm not saying prejudice against LGBT, I'm just saying prejudice writ large, whether it's racial, whatever. I do think that we need to understand our self-awareness about the homosexuality. What is it that we believe? That's a good one. That's a hard one. But I think it goes back I don't know that you're going to have a 2 or 7-year-old child coming to you and expressing this. This is probably something more. But the other is, I think, is to try to maybe ask this child. I'm talking off the top of my head. I'm not an expert in this, okay? I'm learning as you all are learning. I learned a lot as I prepared. But I think is to try to understand, how did they get to this point? And to give them information, just as you would with your clients. When the client comes to you and asks a question, you provide them with information. Also keep in mind that I haven't studied the brain for adolescents, but I understand that the brain particularly does not stop developing until your mid-20s. And so, you know, adolescents do crazy things because that's where their brains are, and things don't settle out until mid-20s. So all of these things are coming in. So I think it's, for me, I know for me, I would need to do some more study around the brain, thinking about this prefrontal cortex stuff. Also, what kind of experiences have they had? Have they had experiences in their school? Have they had experiences with friends that is causing some kind of an emotional reaction? Again, that amygdala is going to keep and store all these memories, and it is a major storehouse. If they been bullied, what has happened? And so it's needing to take a look at all of those things to kind of get some sense of the awareness as to why are you bringing this question forward.
Okay, thank you.
That's my thought.
Thank you. I see some other questions in the chat from Nikisha.
Okay, so some of the comments were, thank you for an informative, interesting, and necessary presentation. Excellent presentation. Agreed, past experiences do crowd our judgment and can guide our responses. For a nurse manager / leader, should key aspects of emotional intelligence be utilized during debriefing sessions? For example, after the management of a client did not go as planned. Excellent.
That was a question on that one. Yeah. No,
I think so.
So my question on that one, if it doesn't go as planned, the question would be, is what are both people bringing to that situation? I know for me, I've had a situation where it was this constant problem, and then it just reached a peak where at that point you're just like, I am through with you. You know, you can't hear anything. You may have to step aside and come back to the situation when there's been opportunity to have some thought. Again, this is a situation where probably the amygdala hijacked happened. And there's the need to, as shown on that one slide, is to stop, to reconsider what has happened, to calm down, to let the prefrontal cortex kick in so that there can be some thought around what occurred in that situation. That's my feeling.
Okay, so there's another question. Excellent way of undressing emotional intelligence, excellently articulated. Is there a strategy?
Joe, I would suggest that.
Is there a strategy that can be used to encourage leaders and managers to practice emotional intelligence in managing and leading? Please share.
I think there needs to be accountability for managers and leaders as well. Just as there's accountability for the employee, what is the accountability for the managers? And IE needs to be something that's integrated into evaluation, how that can be integrated in. So it's a deliberative thing, I believe, that you would have to integrate how does this employee function within the workplace with colleagues. these aspects need to be deliberately integrated into the evaluation process. But to encourage leaders and managers, they also need to be held accountable for this process. Often they're not.
Okay, one more question.
Yes.
How to deal with situations that affect you, but you are afraid to share with others?
I'm going to also invite others to give their thoughts because, again, I'm not the expert on this. I've read probably more than you all have. But I would say, why are you afraid to share with others? Again, it's the self-awareness, but you are afraid to share with others. And this is the other, from a leader perspective, this is when it comes to the interpersonal awareness, is trying to understand the employee that you have, that you are working with. What is their circumstance? What are they coming from? What's gone on in their lives? It's that practice of empathy. Probably you're afraid to share it because you are concerned about shame. I'm thinking of these emotions and feelings that you may have that it will prevent you from being able to share, whether it is feeling that you will be criticized, these things. And so how can you have a situation where you're able to do that? I'm just throwing that out. I'm open to anybody else's comments regarding that.
All right, so thank you again, Dr. Caroline. Due to time constraints, we move on.
Thank you.
Okay, within the Caribbean, we do have some talented midwives, and tonight we are going to be blessed with a solo from Vicki Butcher. She works in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital of Barbados. She became a midwife, a practicing midwife in 2021. So she is what we would call a COVID midwife. We have a couple of them on the chat. So in January 2022, her aspirations as a midwife is to continue to help women and their families plan and help them in the pre, intra, and postnatally to have a great experience. So we are now going to hear from Ms. Vicki Butcher. Marcia? Thank you very much, Vicky. Let's see some reactions on that song. Talented Midwives, Talented Midwives. Our next session will be chaired by Dr. Sonia Watson Miller from Barbados, a member of our education committee.
Thank you very much. This is a session 3, and we are going to be looking now at the clinical aspect after dealing with emotional leadership, emotional intelligence, and leadership. We're going to be looking at the topic shoulder dystocia. Our first presenter is Mrs. Carrie Ann Morgan Case. She's a registered midwife who attended the Spanish Town School of Midwifery in Jamaica in 2015, the firstborn of 4 children and mother of 2 girls and a son, and works at Calitas Health Center and operates 1, the charity for pregnant women, 2, a support group at the Calitas High School for student mothers, 3, a remedial reading class for adults, and 4, a feeding program for shut-ins. She loves food, reading mystery books, I love that too, and going to the river. Her favorite phrase, only God can help us. Let's give a warm welcome to Carrie Ann Morgan Case, who will be looking at shoulder dystocia and midwife's perspective.
Carrie Ann, you're muted.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Carrie Ann Morgan is here from Clarendon, Jamaica. My background is a little bit dim because there is no electricity. There has been a power outage since this afternoon. But I want to greet you all from the beautiful parish of Clarendon, Jamaica. It's a pleasure for me to present on this topic this afternoon, which we consider as an obstetric emergency. And here, some of the outline of the things that will come up on my presentation. So we want to know what is shoulder dystocia, the risk factors associated, how do we diagnose this condition, the different maneuvers in the management, and the fetal complications, and we'll have a discussion on an actual scenario. Next slide, please. So the management of shoulder dystocia requires a calm operator and a well thought out plan of action. It is very important that if not already present, help is summoned immediately after shoulder dystocia is recognized. All right. This help may include additional nursing staff, anesthesiologists, pediatrician, neonatologists, additional midwives, obstetrician. The entire team is needed because of the pending outcomes that this condition may bring about. All right. One of the main things is to remain calm because we do not want those emotions to come over on the mother. And if we get in a panic mode, then that will affect our chain of thoughts, and we don't want anything to impede such an emergency at that time. All right, what is it? Shoulder dystocia. This is a failure of the shoulder to traverse the pelvis spontaneously after delivery of the head. So the head is born, but the anterior shoulder cannot pass under the pelvic arch, while the posterior shoulder may be in the hollow of the sacrum or high above the sacral promontory, and that is the anterior posterior diameter. Next slide, please. So it can have a potentially catastrophic outcome, and it refers to deliveries where maneuvers other than normal gentle downward traction is needed to complete the delivery of the anterior shoulder. All right, and this is caused by failure of the shoulder to spontaneously traverse the pelvis after the fetal head has been delivered. Some of the risk factors to this mother and the baby includes previous shoulder dystocia. So she has a history of having it done before. Fetal macrosomia, diabetes in pregnancy, a pre-pregnancy weight greater than 80 kilograms, and gaining weight greater than 20 kilograms during pregnancy, advanced maternal age, because there is a little bit of shrinking in the pelvis, post-term pregnancy, where the bones of the fetus are getting hard, anencephaly, a mother with a short stature, so there are differences in the diameters of the pelvis that can prevent the normal mechanism of labor, and a smaller abnormal pelvis, such as a platyploid pelvis. Oxytocin augmentation, prolonged labor, prolonged second stage, and an operative delivery, such as a forceps delivery. How can you identify and diagnose shoulder dystocia? So the infant's chin burrows into the mother's perineum. There's a turtle necking of the fetal head. That means the head looks as if it's trying to return into the vagina. So there is no restitution. The chin is just stuck on the perineum. All right, failure of the shoulders to descend. It is diagnosed when maneuvers normally used fail to accomplish the delivery, and the head to body delivery time is greater than 60 seconds. So once there's an obstruction after the head is born, the first thing we want to think about is shoulder dystocia. What is impeding the shoulder from coming down? Right, and that's a photo of a turtle sign. That's the head being born, but the chin is stuck on the perineum there. There's no restitution, and it actually looks like a turtle, as if the head is trying to go back into the vagina. It's a cute baby too. Once it is identified, what's the first thing we want to do? We want to instruct the mother to stop the pushing in an effort to prevent damaging the nerves and the blood vessels of the baby's shoulder. All right. So there should be no pushing at this time, and changing the position of the patient on the delivery table or bed. And this will allow for some widening of the diameters of the pelvis to see if the shoulders will shift a little. So we don't want to start from the extreme. We want to start from the smallest maneuver before we escalate into anything further. So the first thing we usually do is the macroburst maneuver, where we extend the mother's leg and drop the bottom a little more on the edge of the bed. All right, the position of the fetal head should be noted. All right, so this will be done during the abdominal palpation done before delivery. So we know what position we are expecting the baby to be born in. All right, so this will allow us to apply the appropriate suprapubic pressure so we know which direction to try to shift the shoulder. All right, and it is very important to note that no fundal pressure should be applied. Again, the same reason we don't want the mother to be pushing at this time. We do not want to damage the nerves of the shoulder on the baby. All right, and our aim is to deliver this baby in less than 5 minutes to avoid any injury and hypoxic acidosis. Psychological support to the mother is very important. So we don't want to be about our business, doing everything, and we're not communicating and talking to the mother, allaying her fears, because then now her fears will also worsen the situation, because the hormones that she'll be producing when she's in that fearful mode will worsen the situation. So we want her to be as calm as possible. We want to be talking to her through the situation and letting her be as relaxed and calm as possible. All right, so I want to explain what is happening, and the procedure should be undertaken to gain her consent and make her aware. So we don't want to be just doing what we are doing and not communicating with the mother. Very important. All right, monitoring her condition and monitoring the fetal condition as well. Hydration is important, which should have been in the first stage of labor. And we want to ensure that there is documentation of all different steps and procedures. Let's continue. The helper acronym, calling for help. So we summon the entire obstetric team, all right? Episiotomy. That way we'll get more space to do the different maneuvers. The L, so legs hyperextended. That's the macroburst, the famous macroburst maneuver. Suprapubic pressure. And we'll do some more details on the enterwards screw maneuver, how to remove the posterior arm, rolling the patient. And then the most dramatic part of this procedure and the potentially catastrophic section, which will be the fracture clavicle symphysotomy and the Zavanelli replacement. Very interesting part there. All right, so we'll go into a little bit more details. Flexing the maternal thighs high against the maternal abdomen is commonly used as a first maneuver since it is easy to do. She lies on her back and is assisted into an exaggerated knee-chest position. What happens when this is done? It creates a little bit more space in the pelvis. Hopefully, the shoulder will rotate during this time and we'll not have to continue any other maneuvers. If that does not work, then we'll have to rotate the shoulders by applying pressure to the symphysis pubis. So this rotates the symphysis pubis superiorly by approximately 8 centimeters, elevates the anterior shoulder and pushes the posterior shoulder over the sacrum, flexes the fetal spine, it straightens the maternal lordosis, opens the pelvic inlet to its maximum and bring the inlet into perpendicular maximum expulsive force. So all of this is taking place in the Mac-Roberts maneuver. It removes the weight-bearing forces from the sacrum. It removes the sacral promontory as a point of obstruction. What happens there? It straightens the symphysis pubis to rotate towards the mother's head. The angle of the pelvis inclination is therefore decreased, freeing the shoulder. So when we flex the knees, all of that physiology is taking place. Suprapubic pressure now can be applied, and that pressure is exerted on the side of the fetal back and towards the fetal chest. That is the importance of locating the fetal position so you'll know which direction to do the rotation. All right, this maneuver may abduct the shoulders and push the anterior shoulder away from the symphysis pubis. If this is unsuccessful first attempt, it is important that we try again before attempting any other maneuver. Why is it? We don't want to exacerbate the situation. All right, once the woman is in the position, then the midwife should proceed with a normal delivery of the shoulder. So once the shoulder is free from under the symphysis pubis, then the delivery can be continued. And this is just a photographic demonstration of the changes in the diameters of the pelvis during a Mac-Roberts position. Right. So that's more than one attendee doing both the Mac-Roberts and the symphysis pubis pressure. All right, the Woods maneuver. What is this one now? The woman is put in the lithotomy position with her buttocks well over the edge of the bed so that there is no restriction to the sacrum or coccyx during the maneuver. So we are trying here to create all the space that the baby needs for the shoulders to be born. The midwife applies one hand to the mother's abdomen and inserting 2 fingers over the other hand in the vagina, locating the anterior surface of the posterior shoulder. And that's the clavicle. Pressure is applied to the posterior aspect of the posterior shoulder. Then it is rotated 180 degrees in the direction of the fetal back. This rotation may impact the anterior shoulder and enable the posterior shoulder to enter the pelvic rim. Now the posterior shoulder should follow the anterior following the rotation. And this now may cause the delivery to proceed normal with downward traction, and the delivery should be completed if this maneuver is successful. If the Woods is not successful, that's the Woods corkscrew. So an episiotomy would give us some space to enter the vagina and to rotate the shoulder. We'll move on to the Rubin. And this is where the woman is still in lithotomy position with her buttocks over the edge of the bed, because we want to free the sacrum and the coccyx right there. And the hand is inserted into the vagina as far as is necessary to locate a shoulder. Then working from behind the fetus, push the shoulders into the oblique diameter. And once the shoulders are in the oblique diameter and free of the symphysis pubis, then delivery can be completed. And the episiotomy will help the traversing of the body to the vagina. All right, so the Jack Myers maneuver, delivering of the posterior arm. So all other methods have failed. Right, and this maneuver was found and caused less fetal injury when compared with traction and pressure. Because the traction and the pressure again, we know will damage the tissues of the fetus, and we do not want to cause any long-term permanent damages. if we can avoid doing that. Sorry. So insert a hand into the vagina along the curve of the sacrum and locate the posterior shoulder or arm, posterior arm or hand, sorry. And the fetal arm should then be swept over the chest and delivered. So we want to deliver one hand and we'll get the posterior shoulder out. So that's the Jack Myers maneuver. Once we get the posterior shoulder out, then we can go ahead and deliver the anterior shoulder. So that's taking the arm across the chest and out through the vagina. Very important to know the fetal position. All right. Next slide, please. The gasking. This maneuver requires that the woman assumes an all-fours position on her hands and knees. And even though the exact reason for this maneuver, although the exact reason this maneuver works is unknown, it is proposed that the effect in a change of position along with the force of gravity and slight increase in pelvic diameter may play a role. So we're doing everything here to try and assist this woman to have a injury-free delivery. Fundal pressure is usually not advised as a method of relieving shoulder dystocia. And this should have been in all caps because we want to remember not to apply any pressure because we don't want to be squeezing the nerves and blood vessels of the shoulders along the pelvis of the woman. So that's the all fours position where the woman is on knees and hands. Zavanelli. All right, unlike the maneuver described before, it reverses the mechanism of delivery. So this is where cephalic replacement is then followed by a C-section. So when all of the other maneuvers have failed, then we would have to resort to a C-section. To carry out the maneuver, the obstetrician will return the fetal head to the pre-restitution position of either direct occipital anterior or direct occipital posterior position. Now at this time, we will be monitoring mother and the fetal condition, reassurance, and the participation of the woman. All right, the head is then manually flexed and returned to the vagina, usually with remarkable ease. Delivery is then completed by a cesarean section. The midwife role is to support the mother and the fetus and ensure that all the necessary, all the personnel necessary are available to deal with this obstetric emergency, which would have been at the beginning once we have diagnosed that there is a shoulder dystocia. Symphysiotomy, surgical separation of the symphysis pubis is used to enlarge the pelvis for delivery. It is usually performed in cases of cephalopelvic disproportion. Fracturing of the clavicle, which is an elaborate procedure where we'll have to deliberately fracture the clavicle to reduce the diameter of the shoulders. And it has sometimes been performed, however, it is a difficult procedure and not without its risk because we are looking at the palsy of the arm right there. In addition, by the time this would be considered, the baby would probably be asphyxiated because we would have done all the other procedures. And once all of those have failed, this baby has now become severely asphyxiated. So one of our aims should be delivering this baby in the quickest time possible. Some of the complications, maternal death associated with shoulder dystocia has been caused by the use of fundal pressure, causing uterine rupture and from hemorrhage during delivery or immediately postpartum, extensive vaginal and cervical and perineal lacerations and vaginal hematoma are suggested as a sequel to shoulder dystocia. Postpartum hemorrhage should also be anticipated. After the delivery of the baby, we want to examine this woman carefully to ensure that she is in optimal maternal condition. So we want to examine all the areas carefully. If an episiotomy was done, ensure it is sutured within a reasonable time to prevent excessive bleeding. All right. We want to diagnose any other problems as soon as the delivery is completed. The outcome of the fetus, the most obvious and immediate consequence is birth asphyxia. Meconium aspiration is also frequently associated with these deliveries, especially the post-date babies. Right? It may not have been seen, but because of the asphyxia and the delay, it may have caused the baby to pass some meconium during that time. So there has to be preparation for resuscitation of this asphyxiated baby. Hence why we had a neonatologist and a pediatrician summoned once a diagnosis was made. Some of these complications continued. It includes Erb's palsy. And this can be caused by fundal pressure with traction, and it can be a worse outcome for the feet, for the baby after birth. Because then we have,
let the people know straight up.
we'll have brachial plexus injury. Right, infants experiencing shoulder dystocia are known to have serious, immediate, or long-term morbidity. It is therefore essential that the pediatrician be called at this delivery.
Thank you
Before
very,
you,
thank you very much, Carrie Ann Morgan Case. We're going to leave the questions till after our second presenter. Our next presentation will be on shoulder dystocia, will be by Dr. Colin Jagoneff from Trinidad. Dr. Jagoneff is a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist at the San Fernando General Hospital in Trinidad for the last 12 years and has been employed as a senior medical officer with the SWRHA for 17 years. He was a previous head of the Department for Obstetrics and Gynecology Department at San Fernando between 2017 to 2021. He graduated from the University of the West Indies Mona campus in Jamaica in 1995 with his bachelor's degree in medicine and bachelor's in surgery, and began his training in obstetrics and gynae at the Cornwall Hospital, Montego Bay, Jamaica in 1997, and later at the Mount Hope Women's Hospital and San Fernando General Hospital in Trinidad. He worked and gained his UK experience at the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary and Ragmore Hospital in Scotland, where he acquired an MRCOG and a DFFP qualifications before returning to Trinidad. Dr. Jagoneff also completed his MBA in Hospital and Health Service Management in 2022. He has a thriving private practice attending to the needs of pregnant women and women with gynecological conditions in the city of San Fernando in Trinidad. The floor is now yours, Dr. Jagoneff.
Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, let me say thank you for inviting me to be part of your presentation. I was really happy that Carrie Ann presented first because it showed that we use the same resources, and basically mine will be a repetition of hers, her presentation. But what is important is the perspective from my side, the obstetrician, and what I see as more important. And you could start a lot of it. I will be talking off from the top of my head, and I will show the presentation in a short while. But first of all, I realized from the video that my image is quite dark, and I do apologize for the poor lighting in my room here. So what is the function of the midwife or the obstetrician for the pregnant woman? What would they want us to do? Well, most of it would be supportive care. Supportive care during the antenatal period, during the labor and delivery. They want to make sure that we give or help with the most pleasant of an experience that the mom is having during childbirth. They want to ensure that they have a safe delivery. And we also want to make sure that the baby, the baby is brought into the world in the best condition possible. So let me see if you guys can see my screen. Let's see here. Can you all see the screen there?
It's coming up. It's coming up. Not there yet.
Yeah, we can see that you're sharing the screen. Yes, we can see now.
Okay, it's there now.
Okay, so this is my presentation, and as I said, it's going to be more or less a repeat of Carrie Ann's. But again, from my perspective, when I started to create these slides, I said, what is important for me? Well, shoulder dystocia, we know, is a difficult labor and delivery. It comes from the Greek word.
Can you put it in presentation mode, please, Dr. Jagana?
Presentation mode, as in slideshow mode?
Slideshow,
Yeah,
yeah.
slideshow.
Okay.
From beginning.
It does. We need to do some things that
Go to the
a bit hard,
beginning.
yeah.
Slideshow and go down to the first thing from beginning. Yeah,
Okay.
from beginning.
Right to the
right on to the end. Right.
that one.
Okay, great. Right.
Great.
So
Thank
shoulder
you.
distance. No problem. Right. So definition: slow or difficult labor, coming from the Greek word this meaning difficult, and of course with what happens. Shoulder dystocia is a medical emergency. Most of these things were mentioned before. One or both of the shoulders get stuck, and the main thing here is often very difficult to predict, and times cannot predict it. Happens in roughly about 2.2 to 3% of pregnancies. So that will work out to be about 1 to 2 every 100 deliveries that we do. So for a facility like mine's in San Fernando in Trinidad, where we do about 400 to 500 deliveries a month, we are expected to see a couple cases of shoulder dystocia. Now, the incidence varies by the weight of the baby. We know that for bigger babies, the incidents are more common. For smaller babies, less, 0.6 to 1.4% of babies between 2.5 to 4 kilograms, which is 5.5 to 9 pounds. And the incident goes up to about 5 to 10% for babies over 9 pounds. Bearing in mind that the majority of babies that are delivered are less than 9 pounds, we would expect that most of the cases of shoulder dystocia to actually occur in babies of a normal weight. So using weight alone is not a good predictor. What is important here when we created the second slide? Well, most cases with shoulder dystocia, baby and mom recover as well. So why is this so important for us? I mentioned it in the previous presentation. Mom can suffer from postpartum hemorrhage, 11%, requiring blood transfusions or ICU care depending on how severe. Perineal tears, vaginal lacerations, rectal lacerations, so 3rd and 4th degrees lacerations, about 4%. And with this, there is the possibility of the rectovaginal fistula. Uterine rupture from uterus contracting excessively, And we mentioned maternal death, severe hemorrhage as part of that, and symphysis pubis diastasis or separation. So that's for the mommy. But what about the baby? Well, fracture of the baby's clavicle humerus can occur during the delivery process, damage to the brachial plexus, causing weakness in about 4 to 15% of babies, which will occur basically severe damage 0.1 to let's move this 0.1 to 0.5% of 0.1 to 0.5 of every 1,000 births. Birth asphyxia, hypoxia, permanent neurological damage. And this was mentioned when we say we want to try to deliver this baby within 5 minutes. So this is most like, it's rare, but it's most likely due to cord compression while the baby cord is being squeezed in the vagina or across the chest. So most cases where the cord compression and hypoxia is severe will lead to irreversible brain injury and death. Horner syndrome was something that I came across during the research, and it's not one that I would say that I've ever seen before. But weakness in the face, the eyelids, drooping eyelids, irregular pupils, all of this has to do with disruption of the sympathetic nerves coming from the brain. And we think that is part of the birth injury resulting from the trauma birth. So we have injuries that will occur to both mom and both baby, but we said most of these will resolve. So why shoulder dystocia? What's so important? Well, litigation. And I don't know if you all came across it, but I certainly, as being part of the management aspect and from the head of the department post in San Fernando Southwest, and going to the senior legal officer to discuss some of these cases. Litigation is big, and we don't want to have, especially for a private practice, a midwife delivering on her own in the rural setting, or having to be faced up in any sort of litigation issues. Most cases of litigation, malpractice suits brought on by the patient will be basically saying that delivery was mismanaged. And in fact, when we look at the majority of cases where there was serious injury, we have nearly about half of the deliveries were due to substandard care. The lawyers will come and say, well, based on the risk factors, we should have known that shoulder dystocia was likely to occur. Somebody else will come and say, well, you have enough risk factors, why shouldn't we have done a cesarean section? And then even if we can defend all of this, permanent injury, when we stand up in the court of law with a jury, we will want to know, why are we not offering the baby some sort of compensation? This part here, part C, they will also say that, well, we pulled too hard, we didn't do the correct maneuvers, and we were responsible. Point C is under a little bit of controversy because growing evidence is saying that, well, different things, including expulsive forces during labor from the mommy's side, the position of the baby during labor can contribute to. But yes, we also contribute about 15% of cases with inappropriate maneuvers, including excessive pulling and forcing. So litigation is one of the things that was high in my mind when this presentation was here. And when you think about litigation, well, look at this one. You're going to come and say, well, we are the cause of Erb's palsy, brachial palsy, cerebral palsy, permanent disfiguration, loss of use of the shoulder, distress, death, developmental delays, and they will bring a list of things here on the right-hand side of the screen, what we should have looked for. And all of these things were mentioned before. Big baby, gestational diabetes, increased weight gain, large fundal height, small pelvis, short stature, previous big baby. So all the risk factors that we mentioned before in the first presentation. And what I put at the bottom here is that In fact, the only ones that are of any weight would be a history of previous shoulder dystocia, history of previous macrosomia, diabetes, and a small stature, or instrumental vaginal deliveries. This one here was most likely to be a factor leading to shoulder dystocia. So litigation, difficult uphill battle because you can't defend or you can't convince a jury easily that we should not be paying out money to help this poor suffering mother with a baby of a lifetime of challenges to come. Payouts will range somewhere between $1 to $3 million US on average, and most companies will be shying away from going to court, so they will try to settle. These are just some of the figures that on the internet, when you look, you'll see it ranges from as low as 1.5 to up to 73 million US dollars were awarded, and these were damages. And I put this one here just so that we understand, both from an obstetrician, but more so from a midwife. Midwives are not going to get away from the legal aspect of it. This particular midwife was sued and found negligent, and this claim was 8.9, nearly 9 million US dollars. I can't tell you about these, but all these cases were on the internet that you can find. So it is a big area, and while we are covered, some of us from hospital practice or insurance from our own private insurance, still has a big payment to come out, especially if we have to pay the bill for ourselves and for the organizations that we may work for. Right, so coming back to this, we want to prevent litigation. We want to prevent complications. So we mentioned about some of the risk factors. How could we prevent this? Well, you need to know what are the risk factors. So you'll find that my presentation here is jumping a little bit differently from the first presentation, because I am trying to figure out, well, how do I flow with this? Yes, I know that shoulder dystocia will occur. Yes, I know some of the complications and why I want, but how can I prevent it? Well, I need to know the risk factors, and the risk factors are small. No symptoms, no way to predict, or very little way to predict when shoulder dystocia will occur. We said that most of the cases occur with normal babies, small babies. Bigger the babies, yes, they have more risk, but bigger babies only account for 15%. So the bulk of the babies are in the normal range. Primigravida, you'll think that the first time mommy will be more likely, but no, mummies, multigravidas and primigravidas, the same risk. What we should be doing here, and it all depends on the level, the numbers of deliveries. In my earlier days as a house officer registrar, I would have come across more shoulder dystocias during labor and delivery because I was doing more labor and delivery management. As a consultant, you'd hardly get me doing a labor and delivery, but the midwives deal with the bulk of labor and delivery. So you all need to have a high level of suspicion, high level of experience based on what you see from the history of the patient, the events that are occurring during labor. You need to prepare yourselves beforehand, before the events, drills and skills. Appropriate help, appropriate equipment must be in place if you suspect this is going to be occurring. So you should be aware of the existing risk factors if the patient comes in. So when the mom comes to us in the antenatal clinic, or if the midwife sees the mummy, well, you're trying to figure out what are the risk factors. Previous shoulder dystocia, previous big baby, previous trauma, mummy with diabetes, overweight, small, short stature. All of these things here we mentioned in the first list, if we go back, what the lawyers already know as their risk factors. We have to also know that these are our risk factors that we should be looking out for what patients are more likely to have a difficult labor and delivery. Baby, previous big baby, baby with malposition, or in this pregnancy, the mummy has a multiple pregnancy. Most of the times, the patients are seen in the antenatal clinics or the clinics outside, and they present to the labor ward without us having any previous input into the care. So when the patient comes to the labor ward, we should be asking these things. Is this a multiple pregnancy? Was labor induced? Did she have during the labor course a long first stage, a long or short second stage, a rest? Are we using an instrument to deliver? And in some cases, the midwives may be doing the instrumental delivery, or in more cases, the obstetrician might be involved in. And we talk about the turtleneck sign occurring as well. So how can we prevent shoulder dystocia? Well, prevention has to do with preventing the baby, first of all, or selecting the right cases for labor and delivery. So if you identify a high-risk case, and we said only in about 15, 16% of cases, you need to make sure that these patients are right. So you need to make sure that these patients are laboring in the appropriate place. So home births, births in the distant rural settings, you may want to think about transferring this patient into a hospital setting while she's in labor, even allowing her to deliver in that setting when she goes into counseling her to deliver in that higher area for observation. Low risk cases, lowering the risk, controlling diabetes, controlling the weight of the patient, avoiding unnecessary procedures. Some patients, this is a controversy, whether we choose to do a cesarean section or not. It all depends again on the weight of the baby when this is done. But we found that for babies that were large, babies suspected macrosomic, you can either induce the labor or you could do a cesarean section. If you induce the labor for suspected macrosomic patient, you actually didn't decrease the risk of shoulder dystocia, and we didn't decrease the risk of maternal injury. The same way for a non-diabetic with suspected macrosomia, you needed to do roughly about 1 in 2,500 delivery C-sections to prevent a serious case of not shoulder dystocia, but brachial plexus injury. The figures change slightly for diabetic patients, where induction of a diabetic patient may decrease the risk of a macrosomic baby and decrease the risk of shoulder dystocia, but it didn't decrease the risk of morbidity and injury to baby and mommy. For macrosomic diabetic patients, though, cesarean section might be a better option. So before the patient actually comes in for labor and delivery, we need to identify certain risk factors. And when the patient is there with us for labor and delivery, we're supposed to have prepared ourselves with the appropriate skills, drills and skills. Everyone in the labor room, in the department, the midwives, prepared to perform the maneuvers. Checklists should be created by the department or an algorithm, and the algorithm, the Royal College of Obstetricians Gynecologists, the Royal College Guidelines, has a clear guide algorithm and a checklist. So diagnosis, said already, baby is delivered, the head is delivered with gentle, head is delivered, but the shoulders we are unable to deliver with gentle traction. We've tried, a minute has passed, and we need to do more maneuvers. And the same signs that we see. Turtleneck sign, the face pulled up against the perineum, failure for restitution, shoulder does not descend. So we have the diagnosis now of shoulder dystocia with this patient in labor. What is the next step that we need to do? Well, don't panic. Move a little bit quickly. We want to try to get the baby delivered within 5 minutes. Don't pull, don't use excessive force. Somebody has to take charge, either the midwife who is doing the delivery, the doctor who is doing the delivery, or the senior person in charge of the facility takes charge. Communicate with the patient. Right. Yeah, communicate with the patient, the relatives, if the relatives happen to be in the delivery room, and call for the staff. And we mentioned about the helper mnemonic coming um, from the advanced life support uh, courses. And it's the same thing that we went through again. So for interest of time, we'll skip through this. Help for senior persons to get involved, including the obstetrician, OT staff, anesthetist, neonatologist. Use the checklist to make sure that we're not skipping any steps and go through. And for litigation purposes, we're supposed to be recording the maneuvers, recording the time, putting things in place. So while we are going about our stuff and communicating, somebody has to be recording this, because if things go well, you don't hear about it. But if things go badly, you will hear about the legal situation later on. This is just a little diagram of the algorithm to follow, and it goes through, and every department should have a similar algorithm created or take one from an existing algorithm that is existing. And the same way, monitoring all the procedures. And these are forms that were created for our hospital in San Fernando. Right, so evaluate for episiotomy. The literature is saying, well, it may not be necessary. I personally, from my experience, like the idea that the episiotomy is done early. It creates room, it creates access for the additional procedures. Some people may differ, or it might be causing controversy. I have found this to be beneficial for my particular practice. McRoberts maneuver is one of the easiest procedures to do, and it does help in the majority of cases. Symphysis pubis pressure directed towards the lateral side and downwards to help to cause the acromial diameter to be smaller and to help to dislodge the shoulder. Enter maneuvers, we talk about the internal rotation of the baby and wood screw maneuver and the other maneuvers to help with delivery. Right. If all fails, what to do? At this point, you'll be panicking. So, fracture the clavicle, Zavanelli's maneuver, symphysiotomy. Zavanelli's maneuver, I've never had to do, I've never seen, so I can't comment on the statement that the head goes back easily. I would be frightened when this becomes necessary. Fracture the clavicle, fracture the humerus. I have instructed my officers, break a bone if you need to. It will heal. We can fix that. But a baby that comes up with neurological complications, also severe brain damage, we cannot recover from that. So most babies will recover well within 3 months. Most babies with shoulder dystocia will be functioning normally within 18 months. 82% brachial plexus injuries will heal in more than 90%. The 10% that does not, less than 10%, it will result in permanent injury. And this is where you are more likely get your legal complications coming from, right? These are more likely to be for the larger infants, the more difficult deliveries. So the important part here is to know how to limit your risk, because going back to the first part here, while you may do everything necessary, the lawyers are going to come after us to get some sort of compensation for the clients, and they will claim that we mishandled the delivery. You must know the steps, you must have practiced the steps, you must have documented the steps correctly, and we must not get frightened. And only by repeating the whole procedures over and over and getting it, practice makes perfect. That is the only way that you will, in the time of difficulty, know exactly what to do. Right. So thank you very much for being part of my little presentation. I will try to get this. Right.
Okay. So question and answer section will be done by Chanel Davis Gentle. So if you have
Good
any
night.
questions for Carrie Ann Morgan Case,
So in the chat, we didn't have any questions thus far, but we had lots of comments. And I think both Dr. Jagannath and Mrs. Shea's case were so calm and clear and detailed in their presentation that I think possibly we are absorbing it. But anyone with any questions, we had comments. Lovely presentation, refreshing and informative. Awesome presentations, great presentations, very nice. Excellent. Thank you for the presentations. Anyone has any questions that they would like to ask? Excellent job by both.
I think both presentations were very clear, and I really appreciated the medical legal aspect by which Dr. Jagannath came from.
Yes.
I think that kind of brought it all together. I was worried when Carrie Ann started presenting. I said she left nothing for Dr. Jagannath to say. But he was able to navigate that with the medical legal side, which is very important.
Any
One thing I
questions?
have a question though. Dr. Jagannath, in your experience, do you find that lawsuits normally come when the psychological aspect of the mother was not properly handled during the procedure?
Lawsuits will pop up about 3 or 4 years later. The first part, whether the mommy, it does help to calm the situation, to explain the situation. But after the anxiety and the difficulty of the labor and delivery has occurred and the first couple of weeks have passed, then is where you get the input from relatives, friends, family, everyone else, including lawyers, and you start. You could have done everything perfectly, explained everything perfectly. When the input comes from the other people who are not part of the situation, start getting the lawyers involved. And the lawyers, and I don't mean to make it difficult, but the lawyers are out to seek their client's interests, and their client's interest means compensation in one way or the other. So you could, as you said, do everything great, but mommy needs money to help to take care of this baby for the rest of, more likely for a good portion of the baby's life, and a good start financially will help, and the lawyer has a job to do. One of the things that I mentioned or failed to mention is the steps. In the steps of the helper, for my procedures, you'd find that I skip steps. So I don't go in reverse, but I may leave out the internal rotation and go straight to delivery of the posterior shoulder and episiotomy, because that quickens the delivery process for me and increases my risk. So I have been fortunate in not having to have any of those things. But the delivery, the accoucheur needs to be comfortable and know what works for them. And again, and the lawsuits will come, no matter how well you treat the patient, it will come.
We have another question. Can you explain again how the avoidance of epidural prevents shoulder dystocia?
Well, so the epidurals decreases the risk of mummies knowing when to push, and it relaxes the muscle. So it may, and this is just talking again from the top of my head, it may allow for malrotation and impaction of the shoulder, or even for patients, you may want to go back to why is the patient having an epidural? If it was a difficult labor and delivery, big baby, what was causing the person to request pain relief there. So you have two parts to it. One person might be requesting pain relief because something is going wrong in the labor and now masking the events to say bail out with a cesarean section early, or you might be contributing to those factors that prevent the proper rotation and descent of the fetus. I hope that is correct.
Any other questions or comments? We have another comment. Excellent, informative presentation by both. Excellent and informative. I felt truly refreshed, having not done deliveries for a while. Lovely reminders of my years in the labor units.
I think that's the end of the question and answer. Okay, so we'll go back to the president for the presentation of certificates for the leadership seminar and any announcements.
Thank you very much, Sonia, Dr. Miller, for your facilitating, and Chanel for your question and answer period, and to the presenters. Awesome presentations, weren't they? Let's have some reaction in the group. Let's have some thumbs up, some applause if you really enjoyed those this educational session that we had today. I thought, yes, we see all of the reactions. Thank you very much. All of our speakers were on point. They gave us food for thought, and they gave us refreshers for those who have not been in the labor room for a minute. Awesome, awesome. Thank you very much. Now, as you would have heard at the beginning of the educational session, Etheldra James, she alluded to the fact that we had a leadership workshop that started on the 1st of July. Every Friday, we had two presenters, and she went through those presenters. I'm very happy to say that we utilized presenters from the Caribbean, with the exception of Carolyn Curtis that we had tonight. All of our presenters were local, and they were awesome. They were awesome. And so we had at least two, and most times 3 persons from each of the islands. And so what we will do right now, we're going to have a virtual presentation of certificates. Some of them will get certificates of completion. Some of them will get certificates of attendance, because they had to attend all of the sessions in order to get that certificate of completion. But let's give me a minute. There's so many things showing up on my screen, I can't see. Okay, so we had, as Etheldra said, we had 25 participants, and we will go by island. And they opted to send their pictures. So those who did not send their pictures, you will have to, you might want to take off, turn your video on if you want to show your face. So for the certificate presentation, we had from the Bahamas, we had Lanessa Davis. We had
Rhonda Kemp, and we had Patrice Knowles Hunt. These were the 3 participants from the Bahamas at our leadership workshop. From Trinidad and Tobago, we had Chanel Dental Davis. We had April Ann Wilson. And if you all see any pictures that don't fit the name, excuse me, it was not deliberate. And we had Deborah Cox Warner. Yes, Deborah, we see your face. She's showing her face on her video. She forgot to send me her picture. Thank you very much. From St. Lucia, we had Shirlene Duncan and Rhonda McLaurin Alfie. We also had Persia Ajoda, but I don't think she is here tonight. Persia, are you here tonight? She did not send her picture.
She was on earlier.
I think, yeah, she must have dropped off. From St. Kitts and Nevis, we had Nikisha Hazel and Karen Crawford. From Jamaica, we had Latoya Pinnock Stevenson and Lois White Napier and Shanette Black. Shanette, are you on? You're going to show your face? I don't remember seeing Shanette tonight.
She's not on.
All right. From Guyana, we had Sedina Ford, Lucretia Innes. From Dominica, Claudia Duran John Baptiste, Etheldra James, and Gail Frederick Drago. Gail, are you still on? You didn't send me a picture. From Barbados, we had Marlo St. Hill, Bernadette Cadogan, and Marguerite Bourne Clark. Marguerite, you did not send your picture. Come on, we are leaders. Let's see your face. From Antigua and Barbuda, nobody from Antigua sent their pictures. So we had Alia Gregory. Are you still Alia? Ethelyn Harris Weeks and Rosalia Carrier Joseph. These were the participants of our workshop. Please give them a round of applause, thumbs up for their sacrifice. They attended sessions on a Friday evening, people. Yes, we were brave. We chose a Friday evening for the presentations, and whereas we didn't have 100% attendance, we had consistent attendance from most of our participants, and we say thank you. Now, so they will be receiving their certificates virtually after they have completed their final evaluation of the workshop. The final lecture was the emotional intelligence, and so that after the overall evaluation and the evaluation of that particular lecture, they will be receiving their certificate. Now for everybody else on the chat, and including the participants, there is another evaluation that evaluates our AGM. I just put it in the chat. It's a Google form. So in order for you to get your certificate from this AGM, you are to access the link on the Google form and complete it and then hit send. There were at least 270, almost 280 persons on the call. So thank you. You will have to give us a couple of days, a couple of weeks, I should say, to get your certificate to you. So we are now in the 21st of July. So about the second week in August, if you do not see your certificate, then you can start asking questions on your certificate. But you must fill out the form in order to get your CE hours, your CPD hours. Okay, so we thank you very much. We appreciate your input on the evaluations because it helps to make us better. So thank you very much, everyone. Marcia, this is educational session. Oh, tomorrow night, we have our AGM where we take care of the business of CRMA. And the only way you are going to know what is going on in CRMA if you become involved. We appreciate that you all come to the webinars, but we really would appreciate if you would become involved in the activities of the association. And there are a lot of activities going on. We're supposed to be going into St. Kitts to do some family planning workshops. We're supposed to be going to, not supposed to be, we'll be going into Trinidad to do respectful maternity care research. And there are other things that are going on. We are going to roll out our strategic plan, our new strategic plan tomorrow night. We will also be rolling out the code of ethics that we have adopted and adjusted from ICM for CRMA. All of these things you would want to know about. So we encourage all persons who are members of our member association, use the same link and you come into the meeting tomorrow night so that you can be informed and be motivated to become involved. Thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you to our awesome facilitators and to our Q&A facilitators. Thank you to our education committee, who is the hardest working committee other than the executive.
Amen.
The hardest working committee of CRMA. They work at putting together all of our webinars, and as they are responsible for the educational session for our AGM. Marcia is saying amen because she chairs that committee. And we must say thank you very much to her and her team. I don't know if you want to acknowledge your team tonight, but you'll do that tomorrow night. But yes, we thank you all for coming. And please remember, fill out your evaluation form. It is in the chat so that you can get your certificate and we can get appropriate feedback. Thank you very much.
Yes, carry on.
Yes, carry on.
On the form, I'm looking at the form now.
Hold a minute, hold a minute. Let me stop the recording.